Okay. Wow, Mona, it was really nice catching up behind the scenes.
Really,
People have missed out.
really. A full
They-
hour
they-
almost.
Yes, if I'm coming for a therapy, I think I will have to spend my whole day with you receiving therapy. So that shows how natural you are. As
Oh,
you give, I
thank
mean,
you.
people should feel comfortable, around
Oh,
the therapist. So if I get that vibe and I'm experiencing this, I'm sure so many people will really want to be with a
oh,
humane, the word is humane, with a humane therapist who has the time to uh, get into the people, and not just doing it, I'm just doing my job. You are doing it because this is people you are relating to on a very human level. So those of you who missed out on the chit chat, I'm so sorry, but you have to book a call with Mona.
you're marketing
Yeah,
me. Thank you.
of course. So I got to know about Mona somewhere on LinkedIn. I was reading through some articles, and then I got to know about someone is writing and doing post about therapy and anti-racist therapy and all that. So when I realized, this is very much in line with my course of study at the time, because intersectional analysis was dealing more with gender, race, ethnicity, all those social class and all those things. So I said, finding yourself in a different environment, you definitely need some things to arm yourself with. So I decided, okay, let me just zoom into this article and see. And hey, I saw that there was a free webinar.
Exactly.
There was a free webinar, and I said, whoa, of course, why not? I was going to jump into it, especially because it was going to help with mental health, fortifying me. And also, of course, it was free. Why not? Who doesn't want free stuff? So that is how I got to know about Mona. And regarding the therapy, the session itself, it was really good. Some things we may have overlooked was so eye-opening, and so many things we have been gaslighted not to accept or not to know. It's not been about acceptance, not to know. But when you have insights into some of these constructs and phenomena happening, you realize that there's so much one doesn't know, and there's so much one has to know. So thank you so much for that session that you had. It was really nice, and it was one of the things that got me to realize that name could make or unmake you in this part of the world. I never thought it was that serious. Well, of course, name has meanings, but in an environment when no one cares even about what your name means, the outright spelling of your name looking foreign can just unbreak or make a way for you. So thank you so much. It was such an eye-opener. It was such an eye-opener. But anyway, enough of that. I would like you to to tell us more about you as an anti-racist therapist and your line of duty, or call it, if I should put it that way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the beautiful words, and I really honor you showing up to that online workshop that I had. So as we know, like modern psychotherapy has been dominated by Western Eurocentric standard of practice, and these ideologies and practices often lack the representation of cultural practices, but also undermine the influence of systemic racism and oppression, and how these transform into internal realities and pathologize people, right? So as an anti-racist therapist, I work to dismantle these systems and barriers for specifically for people of color or people being racialized as non-white in the Western society, to find a space of healing that is just and safe. And so in my therapy, when I work with individual practice, I try to create a space where people that are being racialized can thrive and find liberation in their journey of well-being. And I use this by using a holistic, intersectional, and decolonizing lens. So it's very much political, this lens that I use. And, you know, when we talk about decolonizing therapy, it's kind of a big word. This is like the overarching system that I work through in my anti-racist approach. And as Dr. Jennifer Mellon, she's like one of the founders and in this terminology, decolonizing therapy. And she says that decolonizing therapy sits in the intersections of psychological, political, ancestral, and the collective. So anti-racist therapy, decolonizing therapy, it's about recognizing the multi-generational wisdom, but also the impact of colonialism throughout generations and how that interferes with individuals and societies. And it's also about tending to our roots, acknowledging ancestral wisdom and other ways of healing and knowing, which has been systematically erased or stigmatized by Western academia and psychotherapeutic practices. You know, ancient ways of healing, holistic healing, you know, herbal medicine and so on, or spiritual ways of healing. So it's about finding back to those roots as well. And it's also about decolonizing therapy, is also about recognizing not only the mind, but also the body and the spirit. So, you know, when we were chit-chatting, we were talking about how, like, you know, racism and how it sits in the body, how you can feel that something is wrong. And it's our bodily symptoms. Our body holds so much wisdom throughout the generations from our ancestors that we carry. So I try to recognize that as well. Because in Western practice, we always tend to the mind, try to rationalize and disconnect our mind from our bodies. So it's about reintegrating that connection.
Wow.
So these are like the main pillars, and also one that I forgot to mention, which is also very important. It's about recentering healing with the collective, because you know, if we want to break free from colonial change that we are all inflicted by, this cannot happen through individualism or in isolation from others. It has to have a communal remark, and we have to heal communally and collectively, find liberation, reconnect with each other, and find the humanity that brings us together to break free from colonial and racist paradigms, and birth new ways of knowing. So this is like how I can describe what anti-racist therapy is and what I do and continue to do in my work.
Wow. So with what you were saying, this is a whole lecture. It's a whole lecture that has to be taught in a class. With this first, the first introduction that you have given, but some things really stood out for me with the mind and the body, because I believe that we are a holistic creature or beings as human beings, body, mind, body, spirit, and soul. And all these things interconnect. The mind is the heart. From my understanding, your mind is your heart, and your heart is part of your soul and your spirit, so you cannot just, I agree with the angle that you are looking at it from. You cannot disconnect one part how can you disconnect your heart from beating in your body? It doesn't make sense in any way to
right?
me.
When you
so,
put it like that, it so totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so it really stood out, and also with the aspects of the community angle, because whether we like it or not, we are created as humans, as social beings. So what is the best, or what is the essence of being the only person fit in a community of a whole that is not fit or that is not well? So it's a collective thing. Unless, of course, there are some people who like to be the champions in societies when everyone is below them, and that is quite that's another discussion around mental health.
Exactly. And it's
Because
tied to like the systems of power that creates these racist structures, this colonial. And, you know, we often tend to talk about post-colonial, that we live in a post-colonial era, but it's still existing in this power dynamics. And like, you know, that we want to remark individualism, and we want to reward individualism and individuals for putting in efforts at workplaces and organizations. If we look into that, but we forget the communal and the teamwork and, you know, all this part that is so big and so important. It's this is the center of decolonizing you know, work.
Wow. And these are some things I really like this angle that we are looking at it from, because I have been to other workshops and conferences, if I should put it that way. But I feel that in a way, what I have realized runs through some of these sections when it's got to do with the mental aspect of it is they make it look more like well, I understand that it has to be like an exercise and a therapy, but what is the science behind it? We have to talk about it. It has to be unraveled. For me, that is my understanding. And of course, I have not seen this in so many areas where it has been really deconstructed and dissected for the public or for the audience to understand that this is the cause and this is the root. So after dealing with the root, then we come to the middle part, we come to the stem or the leaves. And then that is where we have this whole the whole exercise of the breathing and the breathing aspect and all those things. So I feel that this is people have to talk about it. It's really necessary, especially when it's getting into this field of the decolonization aspect of it. Because whether we like it or not, some of us are working with scars.
Exactly.
Especially when you're looking at it from a racial and ethnicity construct. It's there. It's there, whether you like it or not, you know, but how do you how to detach yourself from that stigma and that prejudice is now our duty to do it ourselves. So this is really, I really admire this work. And of course you have backings to back your studies. So you are not just making it up.
Exactly.
So thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
I think it's important to know, like, you know, I come from academic field, studying psychology, and you know, it's heavily based on research. But like one of the missing points is that like a lot of the research that have been gathered is on communities that are predominantly white. Right, it's from Vienna, studies in England, from England, the USA. So a lot of the participants that are you're collecting data from, it's important to remind ourselves that the majority of these studies are conducted on white populations, and so we need an increase in that as well in research, and you know, and also to engage healing on a more global way, and also see how represent the global south in studies. And it's taking form slowly, And a lot of people and academic people are acknowledging it as well. But I think a lot of the wisdom also, we have turned so much to the science part, like to the academic part, that we sometimes forget our ancestral wisdom and bodily wisdoms, that knowings, deeper sense of knowings and spiritualism, and how that also holds a lot of wisdom, you know. And tuning into those parts as well. So that's something that that's something that is probably seen from the West as something controversial and which lacks scientific evidence and a research base. But a lot of practices, for instance, ancient and ancestral practices, has been with us for centuries, right? So we can reintegrate those with evidence-based practice. So they make sense in our society today. It's easy to have this black and white thinking, right? That either has to be very fully scientifically supported, and but also the scientific studies and the ideas and therapies and that we have today, they were also at some point just ideas, right, that didn't have any scientific backup. So this is how we create new research. This is how we build. We have to build interest in it to be able to study it.
And this is how to approach it from a diversified perspective, so it doesn't, once again, it does not only suit the hunter.
So true.
So it's so true. And so this actually fits well into this project or this topic around engaging in an equitable playing field. So I'm really happy that you are bringing your voice. I mean, gathering voices of women in diversity, equity, and equality and belonging. And of course, bringing some of the hidden perspectives or some of the things that we don't even know, we don't think about. We're bringing it to light with voices like yours, both in academia and also in social practices. Because of course, some people are very good with academia, that is their strength, but really practicalizing it is a challenge. But for you to combine both and even make it more holistic and more socially relatable, that is a huge plus. And this is something that we are really looking at gathering and achieving. Because if you are finding yourself in an organization or even in a team or in a group or a social community, you have the eye to see and to detect that there is a bias somewhere. This could be an alternative way to look at it. So having said that, I'm just wondering that per your experiences as an anti-racist therapist, how has the practice been more connected to like an angle of as a woman of color in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Because you have actually captured this whole DEIB in your earlier submission. So as a woman of color, how is it like?
So my personal experience in that.
Yes, in your practice, or even in your everyday life,
Like in the field of psychology, I think, and practicing anti-racist practice has been quite. We're only like a handful, maybe 4 or 5 therapists that works within this field, specifically in Sweden. So as a woman of color, specifically like in this field, it's been quite lonely, to be honest. And also being able to do this work from an anti-racist lens and not having fellow colleagues or other people who gets you or does this work, it can be quite isolating, and it can be very heavy and daunting at times, because you want to push something forward, and because part of this work, this is a movement, right? This is my resistance to oppression, doing this work as well, anti-racist work, and it's hard to shift change when you're standing alone or feeling isolated. So the individualism gets to me as well. That is embodied. So it's really hard to feel connected and have people to support you here where I'm at in Sweden at the moment. But I do have people from abroad. I have joined teachings and training in anti-racist work that has been conducted for years in America, for instance, and they have through them I have gained a sense of community, and I can do my work through them as well, and find some support and bring it to Sweden. And try to conduct it here. I don't know if I answered your question properly, but yeah.
You did answer, and I'm just reflecting on some other earlier submissions I've had previously, and this is about the second time it is running through that the people or the ladies that I have spoken to, they seem to experience a similar trend, that their support base is outside the corridors of Sweden or even here. So I am wondering why that is.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine that this could actually be, let's say, if this is a scenario in an office setting, how would that be? Because this is a whole movement, as you are saying, but then it is not a one-person thing. There is a need for the team or the community that is immediately around the person who is feeling the burden to be supportive. But of course, we all know that this is quite an individualistic society, and maybe that could be they're just okay with what it is, because a friend of mine or an ally said to me, about 95% of Swedes do not really feel, or they don't know the plight of people of color and their challenges. Not because they want to, but it's like the system that has sort of conditioned it to be so. And
yeah, I totally agree with that. It's been so conditioned and ingrained in our system that we don't realize it. It's like automatic responses. It's become normality, and this is where the danger comes, right? And it's been so for centuries, and it's essentially a survival mechanism too. For the whites, it's a survival mechanism, because how could they, if they would admit their accountability and take responsibility over their part in maintaining their privileges and superiority, that would be a hard realization to take away those privileges. They wouldn't want to do that as well, and also admitting that they're causing pain to others who are less who are portrayed as less. They are not less. They're portrayed as less. Or to give that power to them, that would also, like, those realizations would carry so much responsibility, but also pain in that. So I think just closing up and staying individualistic and essentially like tapping out from your humanity by staying rational and in your head. This is how we disconnect for our humanity. This is how we don't feel guilty and responsible for other who are suffering at our costs. Right? So I think this is so ingrained in the Swedish system that we don't even have the terminology to describe the experience of oppression in Sweden. Like, you know, even in my work, I find it really difficult to do workshops and webinars in Swedish because there's not much terminology that has been developed, you know, under the civil rights movement in the USA. This all was, you know, got attention, and there are a lot of terminology and research conducted on racism there, and this is slowly reaching Sweden, but this is not yet admitted. So Sweden as a nation and country has not taken accountability and responsibility in admitting racism. So that's why it's really difficult and can get quite isolating. And that's why, you know, you meet a lot of people that has never reflected upon it, even that people of color exist, or, you know, that people of color might experience oppression or discrimination in their everyday lives. So yeah, it's all part of the system, this as well, this mechanism of ignoring and detaching ourselves from one another.
Wow, so actually speaking about the language and the right terminologies to capture the practice, and also making a correlation between the fact that in Sweden, almost everything has to be, not almost, everything has to be in Swedish, especially in the field of career, much more in an is it right to use the word emerging? With yours, as in a person of color, adding or researching it and doing your best to bring out the differences and also to pinpoint some of the holes. I am just wondering if there are no words or limited vocabularies to even capture some of the hardcore perspectives in anti-racism or anti-racist therapy. How do you even envisage that your practice would even be well assimilated into a corporate organization or even in businesses, especially when the majority, of course, is a Swedish population?
Sorry, what was your question again?
Yes, I am just wondering
if the terminology would fit in.
Yes, if this is if it is a limited if there is a limited vocabularies, how do you even envisage the possibility of even being accepted, or not even acceptance, but integrated in the organizational spaces?
Exactly, taking this in. And I think, you know, this is such a good question that you asked, because if we don't have words or the vocabulary to express what it is we're experiencing, or the forces that are oppressing us, how are we able to make a change, right? So the language we use around this is so important. Is so essential as well. Like even in my work, even in this interview, I'm thinking about how I'm using my language, and English is not my first language, so I'm already thinking like, oh, maybe I've used words that might not fit into this when it comes to decolonizing our language as well. And I think, you know, there are terminology as well in anti-racist work, but it's not as extensive, and it's not, you know, as known yet. And a lot of things, the words that we use, for instance, gaslighting that we talk about, I don't even know what it's called in Swedish. I think we just there's probably something, but I haven't looked it up yet. But we, like, racial gaslighting, I just use that word, like racial gaslighting in Sweden, and people will understand it. But so, you know, you can always use the vocabulary and the words that are used in academia, or when it comes to anti-racist work from, for instance, the USA or other countries, and then just apply it. But that also creates a lot of limitations as well.
Exactly.
So it's important that we start to work from the root, from the ground and up, you know. So when we try to bring in DEI into practice in organizations, it's so important to first analyze the power that exists, the power dynamics.
Exactly.
What is giving us power? So you don't need a specific vocabulary to be able to do that work, right? So through the analysis of power, of institutional power, we can identify and unpack where we are holding power, and remain accountable and communicate that, and also recognize where individuals or groups of people are disempowered.
Exactly.
We have power over them. So, for instance, in this space that we're having, if I would analyze power, it would be, for instance, if my power is I'm taking space, because I'm often giving space in rooms. How can I allow to give someone else to show up to a vulnerable space?
Wow.
That simple.
Wow.
That is the core of undoing and recognizing systems of oppression and power. So,
and that would
yeah, so
sorry.
that is so totally fine. So that doesn't require specific vocabulary in that way. So just acknowledging those powers, and then foster an honest and a brave dialogue to encourage people to team up and to take accountability and create allyship and create a shared responsibility in educating in anti-racist works. And this is where we can gain the words and vocabulary to express ourselves, to put these things in words. Because sometimes, you know, when you experience racism and in your everyday life, like, and someone tells you something and you just know it's so wrong, but you don't know how to express yourself that it was wrong.
Exactly.
Because the society has forced us to shut down and gaslight ourselves to believing that we're overreacting. So you know, we have to also do the work and training and gaining this vocabulary, but also this is not only our job as people of color. So this is also important for the white people, especially more important for them to recognize their power, because if you are holding power somewhere, it's even more important that you admit that, then you have, you know, admit that and take accountability and see how you can unpack that.
Exactly.
And,
you know,
and it's so important, right? And it's not gonna be painless, it's gonna be quite painful. And it's really hard. You have to be so courageous, but also you have to be so self-aware in this process, because we all do hold power in some sense, right? And
exactly.
in different intersections in society, if you look at our intersectional identities of so if we unpack that, we can see that in some occasions we might hold more power, whereas in other rooms we might hold less, and so on. There is always this intersection of power imbalance that we have to continuously be aware of to create a more equitable society.